is on the menu, please,
This
sir?
is an Altoids can. Everybody's favorite hobby enclosure. Countless people have built guitar amplifiers and effects pedals and barbecue grills and you name it inside of these little cans. One thing I've never seen anybody build in one of these is a vacuum tube amplifier. That's what I want to do. I'm gonna call it the Altoids Tube Amp Challenge. I'm gonna set out some arbitrary rules. That way it's a challenge. I know you saw the thumbnail. We're gonna go through the entire process of making a vacuum tube amplifier in an Altoids can. All the technical details and bullshit. And if you're not interested in any of that, all you want to see is the finished product, and just skip to this timestamp. And you can skip all the technical stuff and just look at the amp. Well, since you didn't skip ahead, let's get to the technical shit. There are 5 rules. But that's all the rules. So since the tubes have to be replaceable and they have to be small enough to fit on this Altoids can, we don't have very many choices. The tubes I intend to use are 12AX7 and a 12AU7. These are classic guitar amp tubes. They also happen to be the tubes used in the third act amplifier. I don't know if the circuitry will fit in this can though. These tubes are small enough that they can easily fit on top of an Altoids can, so that shouldn't be an issue. Got some tube sockets here. We're going to install these tube sockets into the top of the Altoids can so we can plug our tubes into it. So it's got the tubes and sockets figured out. What about the rest of it? We need to find a transformer that's suitable to use as an audio output transformer that will fit inside this Altoids can, because I decided to make the rule that the transformer is not allowed to stick up out of the can. I've got this little board here with a transformer on it. It's supposed to step 120 or 277 volts down to 12 volts or something like that. Well, anyways, this transformer has a primary resistance of 3,500 ohms and a secondary resistance of 9 ohms. So we're going to use this transformer. Well, now that I have my meditation music set up, I'm going to go ahead and desolder this little transformer from this board and see what we're going to have to do to get it to fit in that Altoids can. Alright, so I trimmed a whole bunch of plastic off the transformer. You see, I made it as small as I could get it. And now it will just barely fit inside the Altoids tin. See, it'll close. That means it follows the rules. See, because it's closed. Now I've attached wires to the transformer, insulated it all with some Kapton tape, and it made it just barely thin enough to fit in the Altoids can. And I can attach things to it now. I drilled a couple of holes, and I mounted these tube sockets here to the front of to the side. What part of that is it? That leaves me about 2 square inches of space here between the tube sockets and the transformer. If I put the transformer all the way over to one side, we got just enough room over here for some connectors maybe. I found these connectors that will suffice for our input and output and power connectors. And those 2 tie strips mounted right there have exactly 0 clearance between themselves and the tube sockets or the audio output transformer. But they fit. And they clear hitting the bottom by like 1/8 of an inch, giving us a tiny bit of space above them for components. The Altoids tin closes, and like nothing's glued in or anything, but everything's such a tight fit that nothing can move as it is. That's all just sitting there. So I don't think I can ask for a better fit than that. I think this is about as packed as this can is going to get. Thing missing though, there's no volume or gain control. And there just happens to be 1 empty space left. That's exactly big enough. That's better. Now the can's full. Now we can figure out the circuits. Since we like the sound of the third act amp, and it uses the same tubes as this Altoids amp, it seems a good starting point would be the schematic from the third act amplifier. We're going to strip it down a little bit so that it'll fit in the Altoids can and see how it performs with half as much audio transformer. So there's our reduced version of the 3-2-1 circuit with no tone controls And I don't know the value of that resistor because we got to rebias this circuit. So based on that, that bias resistor needs to be a 1.5K. Pin 5 of the output tube is grounded. After testing it with various speakers, I've decided this amp is good enough like this. It'll all fit inside the little Altoids can, so we're going to put this exact circuit in there. This is more complicated than it really has to be, but I don't care about that. But with the circuit tested and proven to work, all the components selected that are going to go in the box, drew our nice little dot diagram over here that shows where I plan to put every component, and these ones over here are floating behind the volume pots with wires soldered to the end of them. It's about time we did some jank ass soldering stuff in a tube machine. So now I'm gonna make this wiring happen in here, and I'll record tiny clips here and there along the way. Putting the wires in, figuring out where they all go, and just having an issue holding this transformer in place, and then I found this little dead ass rechargeable 9-volt. That's a perfect fit. It holds the transformer exactly where it needs to be. So now I can do this whole wiring without having to fight with this thing all the time. So there's about half wired. I got some more wires to run to the front, but it looks like they're all going to ball up over here, and that's going to hold these two things down. And nothing, there's no need for glue or anything. There's this piece of paper down here that's folded up a little bit underneath of this port just to hold it up a tiny bit. That's coming together nice. So I've attached these components to the ends of the wires that lead to the controls, and I soldered them in like this. With this plugged into the jack, see that? Did all that with the adapter plugged in so that the wires wouldn't be in the way. Here's where the lid's going to be. There's just barely enough void space right here for these wires that are going to go up to the lid. So that's how that went. Now comes the fun part. I got 10 wires to route between the base and the lid of this Altoids can, and this much space. When they're all held like this, it looks like there's a bit more room. See, there's plenty of room. That's what I'm talking about. So that will work. I got all the room in the world down here for the wires. They can all just do their little zigzag thing. That's how they'll lay when the lid's closed, basically. Except they'll be squished all the way down. Just enough room here for where the wires go up here on the terminal strip. And just enough space here for these wires that go across. So everything's cool. And these are afterthought cannon on EN1. We'll just worry about those after the rest of the stuff's done. Like that. Clamped with the little alligator clamp test lead things and everything, but I've got them where they need to be, and I should be able to take the clips off and shove the wires down. See? Now that sits down there. The wires will sit in here, and they'll drop down right there in that one little tiny empty space that exists, and they'll go up to right there. So this is the way it's going to sit when it's open and when it's being assembled. And that way I can close the lid, and these wires will go where they need to go, and that stuff will fit there. Should all work. So with all the wires placed basically where they're going to go, but not trimmed yet, we can close the can.
Wow, that's really cool. I always wanted to get a tattoo, but I was always too chicken. Nice placement, dog.
So that's pretty cool.
Thanks, Randy.
So I've got all the wires between the base and the lid where they belong, except for the primary of the transformer, the little close. So it seems I can finally start putting components. I've got my components here neatly organized, so I'll go ahead and get that started. What do you think about that? There's all the components mounted under the tube sockets. If you look real close, you can see the ones that are covered up. There's a capacitor hidden in there.
I can't tell you. Drunken sot.
Ricky, aren't you afraid someone's gonna find all these weak lines out here? No one's gonna be out this fucking way anytime soon. That's where people say they saw the Saskatchewan.
Wait,
I haven't soldered every joint yet, so I gotta go through and do that.
Saskatchewans don't exist.
Yeah, but what if they do? This is no place for a baby.
See what's up. Now that everything else is done, I can extend the wires on the transformer and put them where they belong.
This is fucking crazy, Joey.
That'll do. They need to be flexible. I don't want to be putting strain on this weak little connection over here. But that's it. I guess it's time to hook up power and a speaker to this thing and see if I fucked it up. As it turns out, if you accidentally put the tubes in the wrong sockets, it doesn't sound quite right. And the plate drop resistor for one of the triodes burns. The 12AU7 goes on the left. The 12AX7 is on the right. I had to swap out the cool silver tip 12AU7 because they weren't heating evenly, so we got one with the getter on the side now. But they heat evenly, so that's better. So there's the finished product right there. That's how it turned out. It's got the gain and volume controls here on the side. It's got the speaker connector, the power connector, and the guitar connector. The two tubes on the top. 5 screws in the shape of a pentagram, so it gets a cool point for that. And it gets a cool point for being fully hand wired. But it gets a cool point deduction for not closing perfectly. You can just barely tell, but you have to pick between this seam being straight or this seam being straight. See, now that this one's straight, this one's crooked. See what I'm saying? But that's not that big of a deal. It closes, so it still fits inside the Altoids can. There's plenty of Altoids amps in the world that don't close perfectly. It's not a big deal. But this one is a legit full size orange juice casserole potato peel flavored tube amplifier. It has full overdrive and it's like crazy. It does run on a power supply that's bigger than it is, like way bigger. It's these 2 transformers over here that it's running on, but that's okay. The power supply doesn't have to fit inside the can. Just the audio transformer does, and it just barely makes it in there. There's like 0 empty space whatsoever inside this can. Nothing. So for a power supply, we decided just to stick the transformers in this box. This box that appears to be made out of metal, but is indeed plastic. It's just 24 volt transformers. One steps the line down, the other steps it back up. Ignore that one in the back. That's not part of the circuit. But these capacitors are. That's the rectifier. The box is powered off of a kettle lead, aka a computer cord. It weighs exactly 10 times as much as the Altoids can amp does. So, how about a demonstration then? Well, that's it. No, I'm just playing. For the audio demonstration, I've got the Altoids can connected to the 3rd act cabinet. Just the speaker.
it pretty well. You're getting good high end out of it. But without it, it's just...
Let's say this calls for a complete redesign of the amplifier with different tubes, different circuit, make it better for treble.
like a brighter, crunchier guitars.
This is the bass version.
This is. Yep, it's made for this.
You would have just seen us playing a 4-string bass followed by a 6-string guitar and a 6-string guitar with a fuzz pedal, sort of. And you can tell in that little clip that it sounds much better playing a bass than it does playing a 6-string. Just like the amp that we based it off of does. But what you weren't able to see in those clips is a little phenomenon that happens inside of this tube. If you look real closely down at the bottom of the plate, you see a little window, little place notched out. Well, it just so happens that an electron cloud comes out of there when this tube is under high signal or whatever, and you're actually able to see it. So check this out. Isn't that cool that that does that? I'm not sure that it's not broken, but I'm pretty sure that's just one of those cool things that happens with tubes. So here's a couple of clips of it playing music, copyrighted music of course, because this channel is never going to monetize and I can play as much copyrighted music as I want. Well, we might as well listen to some copyrighted music while watching the cool electron cloud leakage phenomenon thing, so.
God.
the first entry to the Altoids Tube Amp Challenge. To my knowledge, this is the first full-fledged vacuum tube guitar amplifier built in an Altoids can ever in the world. If I'm wrong about that, I'd love to hear from you. And I'd love to see what you made, or whatever. And of course, if you one-up me, which you could easily do if you have any kind of skills greater than mine, be sure and come here and leave a comment on this video so that I know you did it and I get to check it out. And lastly, I just wanted to let you know, orange juice. And if you're watching this in a playlist, it gets repetitive if I say the same thing at the end of every video. So this time I'm going to tell you that I have other projects like this that you can watch if you want to. They're underneath of the better channels to go watch section on the homepage of the YouTube channel. You know, just in case you didn't know about that.